We're delighted you've been able to join us on channel 1390 or by YouTube or by other means that we're not even sure about. But we're delighted that you're here anyhow to have a chat with another interesting resident in our community. This time our resident is Bob Beall, who has been here for a considerable amount of time and has, as you will learn in the next half hour or so, a wonderful and very varied lifetime of work and service and great effort on behalf of this community and others. Helen, welcome back again. It's lovely to see you. And again, Bob, welcome to these conversations.
Thank you.
Helen.
We know that you go by Bob, and that's what people call you here. Was that your given name?
I was Robert Lamar Bell Jr., named after my father, who was named after his great uncle. So it goes in the family.
All right. If you had another name to choose, would you do, or would you just take Bob?
I would stick with it. I have gotten used to it after so many years.
All right.
Bob, where were you born and where did you grow up, if they were the same or different?
I do not admit it, but I was born in New York City.
Full confessions.
But I will not let any of you know that that is where it was. According to family, I spent my first few months there and came back to Greensboro, which was my family's home, in a peach basket on my father's arm. So I made my first trip to Greensboro at about 3 months old. My father had been transferred to New York by his company. He had grown up in Greensboro and wanted to get back as quick as he could.
And then you spent the good part of your life then in and around Greensboro?
Most of my life in Greensboro, yes.
Which has probably seen a few changes.
Many changes. In my younger days, Greensboro was about 75,000 population.
Wow.
And it is, 250,000, pushing 300 now. A great many changes. It was really a fairly small town. Wouldn't qualify as a city at all at that time. Most people knew each other one way or another at that population.
What did you do as a child? What was your childhood like in Greensboro?
Oh, just the normal growing up. Went to Aycock Elementary and Junior High, Greensboro Senior High, and just the normal growing up in a southern small town.
And Greensboro Senior High is Grimsley.
Is now Grimsley High. When they put the second school in, they wanted to keep the Greensboro High, but went to Grimsley so they could capitalize on the G that was carried over. Grimsley was the first superintendent of schools in Greensboro.
Oh, I see. Okay.
You have a rich experience in Greensboro and throughout your life here. Share some things about how you grew up and where you got to go, what you did for your occupation, and all the impact that you've had on that city.
Well, following graduation at Greensboro High, the following summer I started my career at the newspaper at summer work, which is now developed into an intern program. We had a family connection with the paper, and I had been pressured or encouraged, probably, to look in that direction. So the summer I started in the mail room of the Greensboro News, delivering mail and sorting mail, and then went into my first year at Davidson College. I did not get into the student newspaper until my second year, and then worked on the student newspaper through Davidson College. My second year, summer year, I went into the advertising department in this training program. Third and fourth year into the news departments. On graduation, I was expecting to and scheduled to go into our TV station. The TV station operated as a department of the newspaper. That was WFMY Channel 2, which was the first first TV station chartered in North Carolina in 1949. WBT Charlotte got on the air a few weeks earlier, but without cameras. They used film only, and when we got cameras, then we could go live. But then I got into another business for a couple of years, and then back into the newspaper as assistant to the president of the company.
And what area of newspapering did you prefer? I mean, you've mentioned
I had gone through advertising, newspapers, the journalism side. I was pretty much overall. I did administrative work. I did negotiated with our 7 craft unions and the newspaper guild had a representation here. I spent 1 year supervising a building in High Point as a distribution center. So I was general administration. I got involved with the North Carolina Press Association in 1961 and spent a great deal of my time with them, primarily on the legislative committee with open meetings and public record laws. In working with the legislature, our lawyer and a lobbyist in trying to bring those laws more open for publications.
And how big was the Greensboro paper at the time?
We had 2 newspapers, the Greensboro Daily News in the morning, about 93,000 daily publish, and the Greensboro Record in the afternoon with about a 36,000 publication, then combined on Sunday for about 110,000 publications.
And at the time, how within North Carolina did that follow like Raleigh and Charlotte, or?
We were probably the 3rd largest. Charlotte first, Raleigh News and Observer second, and we 3rd. The newspapers somewhat just naturally divided up their circulation and advertising sales around their publication areas. We tried to cover the whole state, and we would give home delivery to any group that we could get 25 people together in the state and give home delivery. That was not economical, but we thought it did give us the influence that we needed.
Yeah. And was it a terribly competitive environment?
Not really. We, in the North Carolina Press Association, we were among the 5 largest papers, but we would get together and all the newspapers would meet twice a year in January in Chapel Hill and in the summer meeting, July, at one of the resort areas. We were very collegial and very worked together. There were areas that we did compete for circulation and advertising in border areas, but we were really a very, very close group. When I first got in, every newspaper in North Carolina was locally family owned. And very shortly, Charlotte was bought out by the night companies. And then along the way, other families sold out, and very few local family-owned papers now in the state.
And if you were to paint a quick picture of the major changes that have gone on since, if you will, those heydays
Right.
to today, what would you say?
Both in production methods, where you went from a linotype and hot metal composition into total computer operation. Also, the reduction of staff, the entire change of newspapers, where newspaper was one of the most profitable companies or businesses, is now just on its last gasp, I'm afraid. Other media has taken, people are not reading newspapers. People are not advertising, and newspapers are having a very hard time now.
Yes, I find myself with the younger members of my family, not anywhere in the world, and my family is strung out around the world, that I find myself a bit of an archaic kind of soul, because I still read the paper every day and do the crossword puzzle in the paper.
I am with you, and I have recently learned to read the paper online. When delivery may be running a little late, I will read the paper online. I do have to read the newspaper.
Yes.
But of course, we did have a television connection, but television is not what it was in the early days either.
No, all the cable stations.
Yes, when we started WFMY, as I said, we had the local cameras. There was no network connection. If a network program was filmed on black and white, 16 millimeter, it was sent by bus to one station. We ran it, sent it by bus to the next station. And it was into the 1950s when the coaxial cable, that was the big thing. The coaxial cable came from New York down, and we had live network.
And at what point, I assume Channel 2 is no longer part of the newspaper?
No. In 1965, the local family ownership changed and was bought by the Norfolk Portsmouth newspapers. And they divided the paper into the journalism section, and then brought the the TV under their TV station in Norfolk. So we separated at that point.
Well, Bob, aside from being a newspaper man, I'm assuming there were other things going on in your life, like hobbies and perhaps some sports or.
Well, I tried,
other things.
yes, I tried my best to play golf. And golf, the game of golf did not want me to play it. And I took up tennis. And I was a fair, could play a fair game of that and thoroughly enjoyed that. I enjoyed snow skiing as that came into North Carolina. I went up to Vermont and took lessons and then joined the local snow ski association. And during the week I would go up, they would run a bus up to the North Carolina mountains for a day trip. And then I did one experiment. Well, I wouldn't say experiment. I was on a vacation and skied the Swiss Alps one time.
Oh.
But it was summer skiing. So that really doesn't qualify.
When I lived in Boone, unfortunately, I was never a skier of any note. But when you mentioned the Swiss Alps, people would some people around Boone would say, "Oh, this is not skiing at all. They'd go off to the Rockies or to
Right.
Swiss Alps."
Yeah.
But it satisfied me.
Yes.
No, it was not the powder snow of the Rockies or even the New England slopes.
Well, River Landing has been fortunate to have you as a resident for many years. But what would you like residents to know about you that perhaps they don't?
Oh, I don't know. I don't know that there's anything that noteworthy about me. I have absolutely enjoyed every moment of life at River Landing. I was tried to get active and ran for the resident council. My first year was in charge of the Employee Appreciation Fund and the second president of the association for the second year. Thoroughly enjoyed both years. Then 9 years ago, I had the opportunity to go on the board of River Landing. And that was a very wonderful and a thoroughly fulfilling experience. And after that, I went on the board of Presbyterian Home Incorporated, where the heavy lifting is done. And that is just one absolutely fantastic experience. Was working with amazing people and really appreciated the experience, the competency of the management of River Landing and Presbyterian Homes. They are an exceptional group. I've been on other boards, but I have never seen one as well run as this board has been run.
And how big, people might be curious, both with the River Landing Board and the PHI Board, how big are they? And
It's, each is about 16 to 18 people. River Landing Board has 3 residents on it, and one of them goes on to the PHI Board. And that's same thing with Scotia and Glen Eyre. It's really been a experience to watch the growth of both, where we have had the enlargement, the additions of the clubhouse. Well, the first addition was the Wingfoot, that, and the Glen Eagles edition, that came first, and then the most recent one of the clubhouse and all of that expansion. Then on the PHI, where we have gotten into affordable housing in Raleigh, and then the association or affiliation with Friends Home. That has been since I went on the board. I retired from the board last month from both boards. But it's a tremendous experience.
Right.
Wonderful.
And if I may, Bob, I just thought of this as we're talking. We didn't talk about this before, but I think we'd be remiss as hosts of this thing if we didn't get you to talk briefly about your church leadership, which is, I remember when we met first, I should, in the interest of full confessions, Bob and I are next door neighbors here in River Landing, and one of our great joys has been getting together from time to time. But your leadership in your church, both locally and beyond, is quite notable too.
Well, I am a member of the First Presbyterian Church of Greensboro. Have had active and inactive periods of my life with the church. But let's see, really got just a mid-congregation pew sitter for many years. But after I retired from the newspaper, I started taking a class, a study class. The second year, the associate minister who was teaching it left and asked me to take it over. So I led that class, a Thursday morning class, for the next 10 years or so. And then during that time, I got interested in the music program. The organist or the organ music has always been a favorite of mine. And they were reorganizing the music library. So another member and I took control of the library. About 1,300 anthems on file. We were starting a database index of the anthems. And so every Wednesday would go in, file the anthems that had been sung the previous Sunday, put out the ones for the next Sunday, and then for major programs. So I did that for a number of years. I went on the Board of Elders for 2 different terms. And in the second one, we were just putting the service on video. And they were making a video disc. So I asked if I could not bring a disc out to River Landing. So for about 9 years, every Sunday evening, 7 o'clock, I ran a disc of that morning's service. But with the new internet connections, we discontinued that and picking it up on the internet now.
Wow,
Well, what did you do in your spare time?
Oh, well, life was just too good out here. But I thoroughly have enjoyed every minute here.
That's wonderful.
I should just, if I may, just say one other thing about First Presbyterian in Greensboro. If you haven't been there, or if you're new to the area, it's absolutely worth a visit. It's one of the most beautiful churches around the local, the state Lutheran group to which I had their state conference here, and your church was the only place that they could have a service which would hold about 1,200 people or something like that. And being at that service in that church was just absolutely one of my highlights over the last several years.
Right. We've done that with the Lutheran church and with the Episcopal church. We have a congregation of just under 3,000. And we went through a renovation program several years ago, completely bringing it up to date. So many years on your budget, they think benevolences should take the privilege, and the maintenance of your buildings suffer. And we had gotten to the point where we had to maintain the buildings and had a major renovation program.
And it worked beautifully.
Well,
Bob, you know that one of our standard questions here is if all the details were taken care of, who are 3 people in time that you would like to have a visit with over a meal or a drink or dinner or, and why?
Well, I would take Shakespeare for the literary. I would take Einstein for the scientific and physics. And I would take my great-grandfather as the 3rd person. We live in contentious times now, nothing compared to his lifetime. He was in the U.S. Congress, a representative in Congress when the Civil War started. During the war, of course, the North Carolina seceded, and that job disappeared. After the war, he was named to the North Carolina Supreme Court. He ran for governor and lost to Zeb Vance, who is now being degraded in thought. And then during U.S. Grant's presidency, he was ambassador to Peru and ended his career as a federal judge. He built his house in Greensboro, raised 10 children, all in a lifetime span of 58 years.
Wow.
Oh, wow.
So I have always wanted, he died 5 years before my father was born, but he was always a strong presence in our family. So I have always wanted to know more about his thoughts.
You've told us that you have nothing but good thoughts about River Landing in your time here. Can you share a couple of special memories that you have?
Oh, well, I have made some extremely good friends here. But the Fisher family, Charles and Alice Fisher, we played tennis together. We had a strong tennis program at that time. I continue with their children and grandchildren. We are in contact, and that relationship has continued on. There have been many others, but just bring that up as a high point, one very high point.
Neat. And do you have a favorite river landing experience?
Well, I would say all my time on the 2 boards would be grouped together as a favorite.
In all your activities and so forth at River Landing, what surprised you?
Well, I don't know that it was a true surprise, but the congeniality, the closeness that the people here have made a family and a small community. It has been a pleasure. And I couldn't say a real surprise, but a pleasure.
Wonderful.
And Bob, as we wrap this up, is there anything that we haven't talked about that you had anticipated or wanted to include in the conversation?
I don't believe a thing. Thank you.
Well, thank you so much for your time and for your service to this place. I hope those of you listening and watching get a sense that people like Bob are often the heart of a community like this, because if people don't go on the resident council or go on the boards or on committees or whatever, an awful lot of all these oohs and ahs that we all have about the place wouldn't be happening.
Well, and it's people like you who have done so much and served so much here that make it so enjoyable for we newbies who come along and have all the experiences.
Well, thank you. No, it is the full residents that make it together.
Well, thank you all for joining us for another conversation. We will be back next week at the same time, 3 o'clock Friday afternoon on 1390, and then whatever other time on these various other sources. And we look forward to having you join us for another River Landing conversation. Thank you so much.